Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video in which I'm going to be tier ranking the 14 Wheel of Time books. So if you have been watching my videos for some time, you might know that I have finished the Wheel of Time series in December and I have not read the prequel yet, but I finished like the main 14 books, so I am going to tier rank them because honestly I missed this series, so I just want to make another video about it. And also I just want to say that this series in general I really enjoyed. So most books I really loved, so even like the lower ranked books are still very good in my opinion.
Okay, before we get into it, actually, I just want to say two things that I forgot to mention. First, I am going to link the reading vlogs for all the books that I have, and they are spoiler filled. So if you want to check my thoughts on them, like more thoughts than what I'm going to be talking about here, I will link them, and I will also link the playlist with all those reading vlogs up there. And I also want to say that I am going to be talking about spoilers in this video. I don't think I talk about spoilers for every book, but I definitely go into spoilers, even some character deaths. So if you haven't read the books and are planning on doing it, just know. And now let's get into it.
Okay, so the first book is called The Eye of the World, and in this one I was definitely overwhelmed. I was confused because it was the beginning of a huge fantasy series, so it was just a lot. And I definitely had some issues with the pacing because this whole series is a bit slower than what I usually love. And I mean, later I learned to appreciate this slower pacing, but when I started, and I mean, maybe it was even slower in the beginning, I'm not entirely sure, but I know that the pacing was something that I kind of struggled with. Like I said, I was just very overwhelmed and confused, and it felt a little frustrating to not understand, pretty much anything of what was happening. But having said that, I really liked to get to know these characters, get to know the world, like what I did understand, and I really like the plots. And I feel like I would appreciate it more as a reread because I would have a grasp on what was happening. And I mean, most of the books, I guess I would appreciate more on a reread, but it was not my favorite, definitely, but I still enjoyed it. And I'm going to put it in tier B. The second book is called The Great Hunt. And in this one, I remember that I had some issues with how some of the characters were acting, especially some of the characters that had been my favorite in book one. So I didn't, love that. And I was still very confused. And a character that I really loved, who was, and still is, like I loved her throughout the whole time, when she was there, was Moiraine. And I remember that she wasn't in this book as much as I wanted her to be. And that is a theme that keeps happening throughout the entire series. I always wanted her to be more present than she was, but at this time I didn't know that was going to be a thing, so I remember being kind of upset that Moiraine wasn't as present in the story as I wanted her to be. And again, like I said, I was still confused. Of course, I knew more things about the plot, but not enough to, fully know what was going on, so I was still kind of confused. But I did like the pacing more in this second book, but I liked the characters a little less. But I was still very invested in the plots, and I also will put this in tier B. The third book is called The Dragon Reborn, and I remember finding that funny in a way because it's called The Dragon Reborn, and Rand was the Dragon Reborn. And he was barely in this book, which wasn't exactly an issue because he wasn't like one of my favorite characters. So I didn't mind it, but at the same time, I did mind it because he's the main character and I wanted to know what he was up to. But like I said, on the other hand, I didn't mind it because we got to know other characters like more in depth. And this book was where my love for Perrin started. I absolutely fell in love with him. I was still on the fence about Matt, like he was growing on me, but I still didn't feel that he was as amazing as I heard everyone saying that he was. On the other hand, this was also the book where I started hating Nynaeve and Egwene, so, that wasn't as good. But we also learned so much in this book, so I was, still confused because I was confused throughout this whole series until I knew what was going on. So I was still confused, but definitely way less, which was, you know, a good thing. I was very happy to actually know what was going on, to understand the world, to understand sort of the magic, and just understand the plot more, basically. And I feel like this was the book when I started to get like really invested in the story, really invested in the plot, and just loving it. And I feel like the pacing was also faster, like there was always something happening. And so I'm going to put this one on tier A. The next book is called The Shadow Rising, and in this book, so much happened, and I was just, thrilled from beginning to end. And I was still absolutely in love with Perrin, loving to learn about his abilities, loving to just follow him around. And Matt, I was still kind of on the fence about. And in terms of Rand, I was still pretty disconnected from him because, like I said in the previous book, he was barely there. And in this one, he was more present, but I still felt pretty disconnected from him. But I was definitely liking to see him learn how to use his powers. So that was definitely entertaining. And again, we got so much information in this book. And I remember there was like one specific reveal that we had that was like about the Aiel and the Tinkers. And I remember being like so mind blown. And I loved this book so much. And this is the first one that is going to go into tier S. Then we have book 5, which is called The Fires of Heaven. I'm sorry if you can hear noise outside, but I think there are people fixing the elevator and they have been making this noise like the whole day. So I have been trying to film this video the whole day, and if I don't film it now, I won't have any sunlight and they're not leaving. So I am very sorry about that. But anyway, book 5, which is called The Fires of Heaven. This one was sad because it was the one where Moiraine died, and I knew that she hadn't died because of spoilers. I knew that she would come back, but I also knew that she would be gone for a very long time, so I was still devastated. And her whole arc in this book, like from beginning to end, was pretty depressing. And like I said, I loved her, so yeah, it was just sad. On the other hand, in this book was also when we saw the Forsaken being, how strong they are and cool in a way. Obviously, they're the villains, but they are very interesting villains. And I feel like this was the book where we learned just how, great they are, how strong, how powerful. And I definitely like to see that, even though it kind of led to Moiraine being gone, but yeah. Also, this was the book where I started loving Matt, and he became one of my favorite characters. There were also many cool fight scenes, and this book was a wild ride, but Perrin, who was my favorite character until this point, and then it's gonna start being both Perrin and Matt, and Perrin was not in this book at all, which was definitely disappointing, but overall, I still enjoyed it. It wasn't S tier, but it was A tier. Then book 6, which is called Lord of Chaos. In this one, we didn't get a lot of either Matt or Perrin, who, like I said, were my 2 favorite characters. And they will remain as my 2 favorite characters until the end of the series. And we didn't get much of either of them, so I definitely didn't love that. But this was a book where I started liking Egwene because up until this point I was kind of hating her, but I started to like her in this book because we started to follow her as the Amyrlin, so her story was also becoming way more interesting. And in this book there were also many cool fight scenes, which I always appreciate. And I was obviously still loving the characters, most of the characters. I was still loving the world. I was still mostly loving this plot, but it wasn't as great as the previous ones, and this was kind of like the start of the downfall of this series for me, but still enjoyed it. But I am putting this one in C tier. Next, moving on to book 7, which is called A Crown of Swords. In this one, Perrin continued to be very absent, which we know I don't like. And I also started hating Faile and her relationship with Perrin. And I was still not liking Rand very much either. I was, however, still really liking Egwene and her whole plot as the Amyrlin, and just trying to be powerful, actually be the Amyrlin and not just be the puppets of the other Aes Sedai. So I was still liking that, but I feel like she wasn't as present in the book either as I wanted. So I definitely wanted more from her. And I was still absolutely loving Matt. Like, even if he's not doing much, just being there, he's just so funny. And his scenes are always entertaining. So I was just really happy to just follow him. But once again, I enjoyed it, but it was not one of my favorites. And again, going into tier C. In the 8th book, which is called The Path of Daggers, I feel like was the first time where we followed Elaine for a long time. And I really liked her as a character, so I definitely enjoyed that. I did not, however, really care about her relationship with Rand, like her and Min and Aviendha. I did not care about that one bit. I mean, I didn't really like any of the relationships in this series. Friendships, yes, they were incredible. They were amazing. I love them. Romantic relationships, absolutely not. But like I was saying, I really like Elaine. I loved following most of her storyline, but not really when it comes to her relationship with Rand and the others. And also there was a lot of emphasis on her friendship with Aviendha. And I did say that I love friendships in this book, but not that specific friendship, because I just don't really care about Aviendha. In the beginning, I actually really hated her, so I never really cared about their friendship, which then became sort of a sisterhood. I never cared about that, and there was a lot of it in this book, I feel like. So I liked Elaine mostly, but there were some parts I did not care about. And there was no Matt in this book, which was depressing. Perrin, we were still not getting enough from him. I was also still not vibing with Rand mostly, but I was liking to see his struggles with hearing Lewis Theron's voice in his head. That was definitely really, really fun. And also fun was seeing Egwene and Siuan being an iconic duo. And there were definitely some cool fight scenes, and there was a lot of cool interactions between the characters, which I really, really liked to see, even though I feel like there wasn't really any major plot development in this book, but the character interactions made it better for me. But like I said, there was no major plot development, so didn't love it. And this is also going into tier C. Then we have book 9, which is called Winter's Heart. And I can already put it in tier D, because this was definitely my least favorite book in the entire series. And there wasn't much going for it, because Elaine and Perrin, who are characters that I really like, especially Perrin, were barely in the book at all. They were, they were there, but they weren't really doing anything. And then Egwene, who was going through such a cool plotline, was also barely there. And in terms of, plot development, once again, I feel like it didn't have a lot of it. It was a lot of planning and not a lot of doing. And also, in the previous book, that happened as well. But like I said, there were a lot of wholesome, cute, funny moments between the characters that made it for me. But in this one, that didn't happen either. So yeah, this book, definitely my least favorite in the entire series. And then moving on to book 10, which is called Crossroads of Twilight. In this one, we did follow mostly characters that I love. However, in this book, we had a lot of Matt with Tuon, and I absolutely hate Tuon. I don't like their relationship. I hate everything about it. So, I was happy to follow Matt, but not happy to follow him into one. And then with Perrin, again, I was happy to follow Perrin, but it was just about Fail and like finding Fail and, saving Fail. And I also don't like Fail. So that was also not the best. However, we did get a lot of Egwene, which I was really wanting because, like I said, her whole plot line was really, really cool. And also, she was the character with which we got more like plot development in this book. And it was very exciting, definitely. And also, we didn't get a lot of Nynaeve or Rand, which was a good thing because by this time, like, I hated Nynaeve from the beginning, but Rand, I was starting to kind of hate him as well. So it was definitely good to not have a lot of either of them. And I definitely like this book more in general, but I would say that it has the weakest ending in the entire series for me. But anyway, I'm putting it in tier C. And then we move on to book 11, which is called Knife of Dreams. And this is where things get really good again. And I'm going to start by the only really negative that I have with this book, and that's the fact that we continue to get a lot of Mat and Tuon. And like I said, I really, really hate Tuon. So that was not fun for me, but everything else I loved. We got like some epic fight scenes with Perrin, and he was so iconic. And at the same time, like, he's super precious. I just love him so much. And then we also have Egwene being iconic, even though she was definitely struggling, like she was going through it in this book and like in the past couple books, but she was still incredible. And I was still really enjoying the struggle with Rand and just hearing Louis Theron in his head. That was always really fun for me. Like, that was always super, super entertaining. And in this book, we also got the news that Moiraine was coming back, which I knew about, but it was still very, very exciting. And we just had so many things happening in this book, and it was so exciting, and I really loved it. And I am going to put it in tier A. Then we have book 12, which is called The Gathering Storm, and this book was wild and incredible, and I felt all the possible emotions with it. And old Mat was back, like my baby was back, and I just loved it because his scenes were, again, really funny, really entertaining, and also, like, he's kind of adorable, and I just love him so much. And Perrin, like, I also love him and he's precious, but he was definitely going through some stuff in this book, and he made me sad, but I was also just happy to, be following him, joining his sort of adventures. And Egwene was, once again, iconic. There were some fight scenes with her that were so, so good. And Nynaeve was actually pretty decent in this book. I feel like this was the book where she started to get decent and reasonable and, like, a person that I didn't hate. And there was just kind of a sudden shift that I was confused by. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to happen, but it did. And also, like, I feel like the major thing in this book was, we went on a journey with Rand. Like, he went through a journey himself, and he definitely took me with him, and it was so, so good. And, like, I loved Rand in this book. Like, absolutely loved him. I hadn't loved him since the beginning of the series, like book 1. And in this book, I started loving him again. And I loved the book as a whole. I loved everything. There were so many good fight scenes. There was just, like, the plot was so good. The pacing was incredible. The character interactions were perfect. I just loved it so much. And obviously, S tier. Then we have book 13, which is called The Towers of Midnight. And this book was wild, it was intense, it was everything. It made me feel all the emotions. And Rand, I continue to love him, so that's a plus. And Perrin and Mat were definitely the main focus of this book, which I love because, like I said, they were my two favorite characters. So I was just so happy to follow them because they're iconic, they're funny, they're precious, they're everything. And also, this is the book where we got Moiraine back, which in itself is amazing, but also, like, the scenes of getting to her and getting her out, and that whole action was so good. I was just like on the edge of my seat. I was so thrilled, so excited, so nervous as well, and that was so good. And obviously, like the pacing, the plot, the characters, the fight scenes, everything in this book was so good. And I think this is my favorite. I mean, I don't think, I'm sure. This is my favorite book of the entire series, and obviously S tier. And finally, getting to the 14th and last book, which is A Memory of Light. And this book was definitely intense, and I just want to start by saying that my babies, Matt and Perrin, were absolutely incredible in it. And my other baby, Egwene, I mean, she died, which I knew would happen. So, I wasn't caught by surprise. I wasn't shocked by it, but it was still very sad. Also, something very sad was when Brigitte died, even though she did come back to life. Like, her bond with Elaine was broken, and like Elaine was feeling devastated because her brother had died. And I just loved their friendship, their relationship, their bond so much. I mean, I love both of them individually, and I really love them together. So that was honestly so depressing for me. Like, I was sadder with that than with Egwene's death. Definitely, that was devastating. Now, things that I loved Andral, which was a character that I think was introduced in book 13, but I only really started really liking him in book 14, and he was iconic, and he was adorable, and he was everything. And we also had Lan being iconic as well. Also, I absolutely loved Rand in this entire book. He was everything. And I mean, this whole book was everything. It was so good. Once again, it made me feel all the emotions. And there were so many things happening. It was chaotic in a great way. And there were so many fight scenes. The whole book was, a battle. And yeah, I had such a great time with this book, and it has to go into S tier, obviously. And yeah, this is my final rank of the series. And I just loved it so much. It was such a good time reading the series. It was a roller coaster of emotions, even the ones that are ranked lower. There wasn't any book that I thought was bad. Even Winter's Heart, which is my least favorite. I can't say that I had a good time reading it because I was bored throughout a good part of it, but it wasn't bad. There was always something that I enjoyed, and all the other ones even better. And especially these 4 books in S tier, oh my god, they were so good. And yeah, Towers of Midnight, definitely my favorite book. I think it's because it was the one that made me feel the most emotions, even though a lot of emotional things happened in the last book. The 13th one, I don't know if it was just because I was getting sad that it was ending, or I don't know, but there were so many character interactions that just made me emotional. And I remember that one specific thing that happened was that I was just so proud of Perrin, and I just, yeah, he made me emotional, and I love him so much, and I love most of these characters in this book so much. I think I ended up loving pretty much everyone, except obviously Tuon. I still hate Tuon. And the villains, obviously. But everyone else, all the other main good characters, absolutely love them. And absolutely love this series. And yeah, that's it. That is also it for this video. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time. Bye!